I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself. I'm Paul Chevalier. I'm a past department commander of the VFW and a member of the National Legislative Committee. And one of the goals that we have as veterans is to bring all presidential candidates here to talk to veterans and neighbors or whoever else is willing to come in here. One of the end goals is to get more veterans serving in Congress. And we certainly would like to see one sitting in the White House. Before we begin tonight's program, I'm going to ask Chris Pierce to come forward, please.
Branching out.
Chris is the district commander of the Veterans of Foreign Wars for this district. He's going to lead us in a pledge of allegiance. So can we please raise and do the hot pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Chris. Please be seated.
Sit down.
Tonight we have a special guest who fits that category, as I told you, a veteran. And we have another veteran, Representative Weiler, who is a life member of the VFW here and is a local representative for the state of New Hampshire. And I will ask Ken to please come up and introduce our guest.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to introduce my fellow reps in the district. This is Joe Guthrie. He and I in Manuel. Dennis Green, just a week ago. It's a little warm, but I'm still wearing my fleece from 2012. Maybe you can read it. It says, Perry for President. Why am I for Perry for President? I've been a state rep for 25 years. I've been in a national organization for at least 20 of that. We sit there and we talk about problems that occur in states and how can we solve them. And it is surprising how often the name of Texas comes up. We have a candidate who's been involved in Texas government far longer than I have been involved in state government in New Hampshire. And all the things we think that, well, like we want to say performance budgeting. Where can we see a good example? Texas. We still haven't managed to do it in New Hampshire, but I'm working on it. And then we get these things that we pass out at our meetings that show how the various states compare. And so here's one that shows corporate income tax top rates. Texas, none. Here's one that shows individual income tax top rates. Texas, none. Here's one that shows migration, and this is a guy has written a book, Money Walks. And it talks about people leaving the high tax states to go to the low tax states by the millions. The number 2 state they moved to, Texas. So I want you to think about what do the candidates bring as a resume. Don't just listen to the flash and the dash and the slogans. What has the candidate accomplished? If Rick Perry can do for the 300 million people in our country what he did for the 32 million people in his 14 years as governor and more as legislator and commissioner in Texas, we will all be so much better off. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce Governor Rick Perry, my first choice, and I hope yours, to be the next president of the United States. A fellow Air Force veteran.
Makes that kind of noise because it didn't. No, leave it on, man. I'm not going to get between them and cool air. So, no, it's all good. I'll use this microphone. That way we'll make sure that we communicate clearly. So, Ken, thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. All of you that men and women in here who've served our country, thank you for that. It's always a privilege to be able to hang out with men and women when this country needed them. put their hand up and said, "Here am I, send me." And I got that instilled in me at a very early age. I was the son of an Army Air Corps member, flew 35 missions over Nazi-held Germany in 1944 and early 45. He was a tail gunner on B-17s. So I know what public service is all about. And my dad is a 19-year-old. He finished up that service. He came home and he wanted to live in peace. He wanted to get married. He wanted to farm. And that's what he did. Along the way, he had 2 children. And he and my mom were both tenant farmers. We lived 16 miles from the closest place that had a post office. Pretty rural. I grew up in a house that didn't have indoor plumbing until I think we were 7 or 8 years old. So we weren't poor. We were just, you know, we had everything we needed. We grew most of it. And we were rich in the sense of having a great family and a great heritage. Went to a little small public school out there 16 miles in the edge of Haskell County, a place called Paint Creek. School was on a farm to market road. Had 110 kids, grades 1 through 12. I tell people I'm very proud that I graduated in the top 10 in my class. And somebody always wises up and says, "How many do you have?" I have to admit there were 13. And my dad was a county commissioner. My dad was on the school board. My dad understood this concept of giving back to your community, giving back to your state, giving back to your country. That each of you understand that very well. And I went off to then a relatively moderate-sized state university that had developed more officers in World War II than the military academies combined. I graduated from Texas A&M, and that's where I got my contract, and I was commissioned into the United States Air Force, went to pilot training, and at the end of the Vietnam conflict, I was a tactical airlifter. I flew C-130s. And my time in service helps paint my worldview. When I left the United States, and I probably hadn't been outside the bounds of the United States, but well, I hadn't been outside the bounds of Texas maybe a handful of times, much less the country. And as a tactical airlifter in 1973 through 77, I lived in the European theater. We flew out of RAF Mildenhall, Rhine Mine. We serviced the entirety of the Middle East. I lived in Saudi Arabia in 1975, flying out of Dhahran into multiple locations in that country, based out of Incirlik in Turkey multiple times, and lived in a host of different countries. As a 25, 26-year-old, I started making the connection between what I saw in those countries and how the people lived, whether they appeared to be happy or not. And in some of those countries, particularly those Middle Eastern countries, I saw people who didn't have the freedoms that we enjoyed. And as a young man, I started to make that connection between America and the freedoms that we have in this country and those other forms of government, the theocracies, the monarchies, the dictatorships that we had operated in and out of from time to time. And that's when I really became powerfully struck with what an amazing country we live in. And that our founding fathers and this vision that they had, and the understanding of freedom, and that these freedoms are not free. And there are a group of men and women in this country that are willing to sacrifice for it. And you're actually a pretty small minority. Matter of fact, today I think it's less than 1% of the population of this country serve so that the other 99% can live free. That paints my worldview. It paints my worldview as having worn the uniform of this country. My worldview is also helped crafted by the public service I've been involved with. Over 35 years of my life, I've counting my military service as a state representative, as the agriculture commissioner, as the governor of Texas for 14 years. Traveling around the world, seeing Texas men and women serve in theaters of war. Our young men and women were deployed multiple times into Iraq and Afghanistan. I had the great privilege to be with them on a number of those deployments. But I've also seen the cost. I've seen the cost in the faces of the veterans, in the faces of the families. From 2003 until about 2010, I wrote a letter a week to a mom or a wife or a loved one of a young Texan that was lost in the war of terror. I understand the extraordinary cost, not just in dollars, but in the lives and the families that have been impacted. And that really paints my worldview about what's going on in the world today. Pretty good bit of pessimism in the world. And there's a reason for it. We see what has gone on in Libya, and in Egypt, in Syria. We see what happened in Garland, Texas last week. We see Coptic Christians being led to a beach in Libya and being beheaded. A Jordanian pilot burned alive in front of us. And there's cause to be pessimistic. But it doesn't have to be that way. I'm sure that the best days of our country are in front of us, as sure as I am that the sun's going to come up in the east tomorrow morning. And I know for a fact that the best days in this world are in front of it. It's going to take a few good decisions and a leadership change at the top. But the best days in this country are ahead of us economically, and I will suggest to you from the standpoint of military and diplomatically in the world. And I want to share with you tonight why I think that, what my vision is for that. Ken was kind enough to share with you what's going on in the state of Texas over the course of the last decade plus economically. And it's been there's no place in the country that can even get close to what's happened in my home state. And I tell people, I said it didn't happen by accident. It happened because we were principled and disciplined. We put tax policy into place that lets the men and women in the business world keep more of what they work for. They knew they could risk their capital and have a chance to have a return on their investment. And they did that. There was a regulatory climate that was fair and predictable. A legal system that didn't allow for oversuing. And we had accountable public schools. Accountable public school basically translates into a skilled workforce. And then you get out of the way and let the private sector do what the private sector does best. And let me tell you what the result was from the end of 2007 to the end of 2014. In a period of time that the rest of the country was going through the worst recession that this country's gone through since the Great Depression, my home state created 1.5 million net new jobs. Now the rest of the country lost 400,000 jobs during that period of time. I mean, that is a stunning juxtaposition. Some people say, oh, it's because y'all got oil and gas down there. We passed up California in 2014 as the #1 high-tech exporting state in the nation. People have come from all over the country to be a part of that. We added 5.6 million people to the population of Texas during that decade. That's not a Texas phenomenon. It can happen anywhere. I tell people, I said, if you put those tax policies, regulatory policies, legal policies, and a skilled workforce in place, it doesn't make any difference where it is. The people will respond to that. Just like a moth will come to a light, people will come to freedom. And that's what's happened over that decade as we put those in place. There has been an absolute renaissance in that state from an economic standpoint. And we're only a couple of good decisions away and a leadership change at the top. The same thing happened all across this country. We have to have a leader that recognizes that the states are the laboratories of innovation. I trust you guys in the legislature, working with your local leaders, your teachers, your administrators, to come up with the curriculum for your kids in school rather than a bureaucrat in Washington, D.C. Common Core has got to be stopped. And the same thing can be said, I mean, we know what our Constitution says. I mean, the Constitution was brilliant. I mean, it was written centuries, 2 centuries plus ago. But the vision that these individuals had, when they laid out this concept of this country, they understood that the federal government's supposed to do a few things. And everything else, you states work it out. Stand a strong military. That was one of the things that's enumerated in the Constitution. Secure our border. Wouldn't it be a good thing if the federal government actually did something that they're supposed to do constitutionally and secure the border of this country? Last summer, I had the opportunity to meet with the president because I wanted to share with him what was going on our border with all of these unaccompanied minors that were coming up, showing up, and we were having to deal with them. And we suspected, and now it's been proven up, that the drug cartels and the transnational gangs were very involved with that. They were the ones that were expediting all of those individuals coming up to our border at that particular point in time. And I told the president, I said, Mr. President, if you will not secure this border, Texas will. And we did. But the fact is, that's not our responsibility. But until we get a leader in Washington, D.C. that understands and respects this Constitution, Texas will continue to do its job of securing that border. And I want to share with you one of the reasons I wanted the president to see this and why it was so important. I didn't want to be used for a photo. And I told the president that. I said, Mr. President, I'll come meet with you, and I want to talk to you seriously about what's going on the border. And he graciously allowed me to come. I appreciate him for allowing me to do that. He and Valerie Jarrett sitting in Marine One, and we have the conversation about what's going on. I'm sharing with him that his border patrol is 45 to 50 miles away from the border in an apprehension mode. And the president looks over to Valerie and says, Valerie, is that right? I said, Mr. President, trust me, that's right. I know this. The president had no idea that his border patrol was back away from the border in an apprehension mode rather than on the border, literally in the river, from my perspective, where it needs to be, in a prevention mode. We need to be sending a clear message. And that's why I deployed our National Guard, to fill in, be a force multiplier, if you will, between our law enforcement and border patrol that were on the border, so that there was a clear message in that southern region of the Rio Grande that you can't just come across the border. And from July through November of last year, with that deployment of our National Guard and our law enforcement, we saw a 74% decrease in the number of apprehensions. Your common sense would tell you that that was what was going to happen. And we need a leader in this country that understands that. If I decide to make the run for the presidency, you will know one thing, and that is that this country will be committed to securing our border with Mexico. It will happen. Economically, we know how to get this country back working. And it is specifically attracted to, intertwined with our energy policy in this country. Our best friend, biggest trading partner to the North, Canada, and we won't buy their natural resources. I mean, I was incredibly frustrated when the president vetoed a bill that had passed both houses, that was supported by the State Department, with the Teamsters unions, with men and women who understood that they would have good jobs in the future if this pipeline opened up. Not just in the building of the pipeline, but what that represents. North America, Canada, the United States, and Mexico, they control in their boundaries more natural resources, more proven reserves than Russia and Saudi Arabia. We can secure America's energy future with our North American partners. And I don't know about most people, but I'd a lot rather buy my natural resources outside of the United States or Canada or Mexico than from Venezuela or some mullah in the Middle East. I think it makes a lot of sense for us to be energy secure. And you open up the XL pipeline, you use all of the energy resources we have in North America, and what you will do is you will see a declining cost of electricity. With the natural gas that we have such an abundant supply of, we had a 40% decrease in electricity prices in my home state back in the mid-2000s. Y'all did not have that. You didn't. And this can be addressed in this country with a regional energy policy that says we're going to use our North American energy resources to make this country and this region energy secure, but also create a boom in the manufacturing side, because if you lower the cost of electricity, you couple that with a corporate income tax lowering, which we know will do two things. Number one, it will lure manufacturing back into this country, and it'll also raise middle wages. I mean, we know that. Every account will tell you 10% decrease in corporate tax rate, you'll have a 5 to 10% increase of those mid-level wages. Every blue-collar worker out there ought to be standing up and saying, I'm going to vote for the guy that's going to raise my wages. And that's what we're talking about doing. We know how to do this. That's the reason the future is so bright to me in this country, is because we have the opportunity to have a manufacturing renaissance in this country like we've never seen before. It is within our grasp. I'm optimistic about the future of this country. I'm optimistic about the future of the world, even with all the chaos that we see out there. I mean, this president has stepped back. In Libya, he stepped back. In Egypt, he stepped back. In Syria, he stepped back. He stepped back when ISIS went into Iraq, the northern Iraq. We could have delivered lethal weapons to the Peshmerga, an extraordinary fighting force in the northern part of Iraq, and they would have stopped ISIS. They're fighting for their families. They're fighting for their home. These are incredibly capable fighters. But our president, he wouldn't take a stand. And today, ISIS controls a larger swath of land in the Middle East than the entirety of the United Kingdom. And they're coming to places like Avalon, Texas, because we haven't stopped. We need to work with our Arab allies to put together the intelligence and the force to be able to eliminate ISIS over there before they come into this country again. You know what I'm reminded of, Ken? Right now, I'm reminded a lot of 1979. You remember what was going on in 1979? I'd gotten out of the Air Force about a year and a half before. We had seen our friends who were still in the Air Force. We would talk to them. They were telling us about how the military was being hollowed out, how they were spending money on all kinds of other things, but not in our military. Russia's watching all of this. The big bears build it up. Our country has a participation rate, job participation rate, as low as it had been in probably decades. As a matter of fact, our job participation rate today is the lowest it's been in this country since 1978, when Jimmy Carter was the President of the United States. And you remember in '79, he called it, we were in a malaise. We were on our back in this country. Economic, militarily. We saw our friends in the desert of Iran in a botched operation trying to get the hostages out of Iran. We saw our wheat embargoed going to Russia. I happen to be a wheat farmer, and it mattered to me, to us. It hurt American farmers. We saw our kids boycotted from going to the Olympics in Moscow. Kids who had worked their whole lives to go represent America, and they were used as pawns by this president. kind of reminds me of now. We're seeing our military hollowed out. We're seeing a participation rate. You know, 1 out of 10 Americans are either out of work, underemployed, or just giving up on looking. I don't know what our job growth was this last month, but it was 0.2 or something like that. I mean, we're on our back. It's 1979 again. But I also think about 10 years after that. In 1989, we saw the Berlin Wall fall, and we saw Soviet communism defeated because we had a president of the United States that knew what America was all about. That would put the policies economically in place and build our military back up and get Western values across this country and across this globe. That's the reason I'm optimistic about the future. Because we're just a few good decisions away and a leadership change at the top of the best years, not of just this country, but of the world. And I'm excited for the young people that are going to inherit this from us, that we're going to leave them something good. We're going to leave them a safer world. We're going to leave them a more prosperous world. And it all goes back to those simple concepts that the 13th largest economy in the world, that's what Texas is. We're a standalone country. The 13th largest economy in the world has been in an experiment, if you will, for the last decade plus. And it's pretty hard to argue that it's not been a good experiment for the people that were there taking advantage of it. I don't think it's out of the ordinary to say that this wasn't about Texans being special. It's about people who understand that if you'll put the right policies into place, if you'll give people freedom from overtaxation and regulation and litigation, you free them up to have a good public education. In the decade while I was governor, from 2003 until 2013, we went from 27th in the nation in our high school graduation rates. We're about in the middle of the pack. Last year, to second highest graduation rates in America. That's how you give people freedom. Highest African American graduation rates in the country. Highest Hispanic graduation rates in the country. That's how you give people freedom. You free them from a burdensome tax structure. You free them from an onerous regulatory climate. You free them from oversuing, and you give them the freedom of an education. It will work anywhere. It'll even work in California. I know that. It will. It'll be hard to implement. But it'll work. And that's why I'm excited about the future, Ken. And listen, as I wrap up and we open it up to kind of go back and forth here in a little Q&A, I just want to say again to each of you who have served, each of you who have served at home, while either your husband or wife was serving abroad, thank you for your service. It's people like you, when this country has been in need, that stepped into the gap, offered your service, sacrificially given it, and when you came home, we made some of you promises that we were going to take care of it. And I will tell you, as a veteran and as a governor, I'm not satisfied in the least that our Veterans Administration is delivering the services to many of our citizens, and we made a bargain with them. If they would go and serve, that we would take care of them when they come home, and we have not done it. And what I'm seeing out of the Veterans Administration today is not satisfying to me. And if I decide to make this race, I will tell you one thing. The veterans in this country will know that there will be somebody that gets up every day, ready to sacrifice for them because they've sacrificed for us. God bless you and thank you. Turn it on high. That's good. Let's open up any questions you all may have. Yes, ma'am.
I have issues with, I've read a lot about the Third Reich and things like that, and I find a lot of similarities between what's happening now with our government and what happened then. The with all the, the supposed poverty and the hunger, and I mean, that's what Hitler did. Told everybody about how horrible everything was, and people bought it, and things eventually did get horrible. And then they went along, and the Second Amendment, I think he wants to declare martial law here. That's why he lets these things happen. That's why he likes it. I just see too much similarity between him and the Third Reich.
Well, the good news is in about 18, 19 months, we will have a new president. I don't know who that person's going to be. Now, do we need to be protective of our rights, our freedoms? Absolutely, every day. I tell people, I said, it is good that people question their government. And it is good to have a little rebellion from time to time, to remind government about who works for who. And I think that's what this election can be about and should be about, is it having this conversation with this country. There are those that want Washington, D.C. to be the epicenter of all decision making. They want to tell you how to educate your children with the curriculum. They want to tell you how to deliver health care with their Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. They want to tell you how to build transportation infrastructure by taking your gas tax money and other taxes up there and then retrieving, and then skimming off a pretty good chunk of it to run their programs and their agencies and then sending it back to you with strings attached, I might add. I told them, there were multiple times that they wanted us to do some things in Texas, and they were blackmailing us with our own money, and we told them no, that we would not work unemployment comp insurance. They wanted us to take a substantial amount of money, but we had to change the way that we did our program. Medicaid expansion is a great example of it. They came and said, here's how many billions of dollars we'll send there if you'll take this money. The President of the United States got up in 2009 and said Medicaid is a broken system. He said that. That's his words. I happen to agree with him. It is a broken system. Why would we take that money to put into a broken system that we know is going to bankrupt our state and this country? And we said no. America needs someone who respects the state's rights to make these decisions on a host of issues. You get the military built back up where America's interests are defended and Western values can be projected and protected around the world. You defend our border the way you're supposed to. Then we can have a conversation about anything else that the federal government needs to be doing. But I want to suggest to you that we've given up too much control to those individuals over the course of the last decades. And this election is going to be about that, because we've seen what happens when you have a President of the United States and a complicit Congress, and the majority of the time he's been there, that's economically got this country in trouble. That foreign policy-wise, our allies don't trust us, and our enemies don't respect us. But the good news is it can be turned around in a hurry. You realize we've got the smallest army today since June of 1940. We got one fighter in production, the F-35. We're supposed to have 11 carrier groups. We're down to 10. The Heritage Foundation says we ought to have 13. I tend to agree with the Heritage Foundation. When you think about what's happening in the South China Sea and the aggressive nature that China has taken at this particular point in time, and for us not to have that deep water, that blue water Navy that can project America's interest, it gives me great concern about what's going on in the world. But again, in a short 10-year period of time, we went from malaise to victory. of the Soviet Union. And it can happen again. Yes, sir.
Now the president signed all the executive orders, the next president that we have, is it legal or feasible for him to just like
Both.
undo?
Start signing them from the time you get sworn in until you all show up at the inaugural ball. I'll be in there writing executive orders. To read, to do away with the ones that he's put into place that have been counter to this country. If I do decide to make the race and that is where I end up, I'm going to be a busy guy from the time my hand comes off the Bible until I have the first dance with my wife. And then we're going to stay busy after that for lots of days. Yes, sir.
You have a lot of good ideas and a lot of good things to say, Your Excellency, but you know something, you got to get elected.
Yes, sir.
And it seems to me that the entitlement programs continue to grow and grow and grow and grow. Way back around the time of the new country being founded, Disraeli Priest Chapel Bertie was asked, you know, what do you think about that? He said, well, when they learn they can vote themselves famous, when the public treasury is probably doomed to fail. I think we're moving in that direction exponentially. How is it in Texas? How do you handle the welfare side of things? And can you export that to the country?
Yeah. Well, for those individuals who, by no fault of their own, find themselves in need, I think our state and most people in this country would be more than willing to give a helping hand. And we do that. But we don't do that to the point that it bankrupts our state. And I think that's the challenge that the next President of the United States have to lay out a clear vision on how to manage these entitlement programs. You know, it's a long time until the primaries, and it's a longer time than that till the general election. We'll have plenty of time to lay out our ideas about how to deal with whether it's Medicare or whether it's Social Security. Obviously, some of the answers are in expanding or extending the time before people are eligible for them. I'm 65 years old. I'm healthy. You know, the fact is, if somebody said, Perry, we're going to come and you're going to be eligible for Social Security when you're 68, and I'm going to say, if that's what it takes to save the country, let's do it. You know, we need to look at a lot of different ways to deliver health care. You know, I'll suggest to you the cost of health care is driven partly by this one-size-fits-all mentality that comes out of Washington, D.C. But the other side of it is the cost of health care is being driven by litigation costs. And we passed the most sweeping tort reform in the nation in Texas in 2003. We protected hospitals and physicians and healthcare providers from frivolous lawsuits. We put caps in there on non-economic damages and limited and took away a lot of the financial incentives for these frivolous lawsuits to be filed. And let me tell you what the result of that was. 10 years after, by 2013, we had 35,000 more doctors licensed to practice medicine in Texas than we had a decade before that. Christus Spahn Hospital System, that's a big Catholic charity hospital system in South Texas. It's a big system. They save $100 million a year in defense costs that goes directly back into healthcare, either hiring physicians or nurses or new technology or new facilities. I mean, those are the types of, I won't even say that those are innovative, those are the kind of common sense approaches that we can take and implement state by state, but freeing these states up from all of this one-size-fits-all that comes out of Washington, D.C. And I think that allowing those types of approaches to occur. I mean, why can't you buy insurance from Massachusetts? Why? Why can't you? I mean, if you live in Oklahoma, why can't you buy insurance in Texas? Health insurance. Why can't you do that? That doesn't make sense. I mean, those are some of the simple things that need to be changed. so that we can be more competitive in this country on healthcare costs. And I'll suggest to you the healthcare cost of this thing is where you really, I mean, obviously, you know, expanding the time, extending the time out that somebody becomes eligible makes sense to me. What do y'all think? I mean, does that make sense to you?
I think the best it works.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, my daughter's at college, and I told her that I was going to meet a lot of presidential hopefuls after the next couple weeks. It's kind of an ironic question. So I said, well, are there any questions that your friends would like me to ask the candidates? So one girl who was a member of the Democratic Club there brought a question, and they decided this is the question I want to ask the presidential candidates. What would you do if you inherited an economy from George W. Bush?
I did.
I know.
And I built on it. You know, I didn't inherit a bad economy, but I was there during some good times and some bad times. We had in 2003, we only meet every other year for 140 days, the Texas legislature. That's a really good model. And in 2003, we came back in January, and we had a $10 billion budget shortfall. And if you recall, in 2001, 2002, there was a technology bubble burst, and Texas got caught up in that. So we rolled into town. A lot of people think, oh, it's been easy being the governor of Texas. You know, y'all got that oil and gas, and it's just been blue skies and smooth sailing. And we had two major turndowns while I was governor. In 2002 time period, then obviously, you know, 09 and 10, Texas got caught up in all you know, we were the last state to go in to a recession, but we were the first state to come out. But we had job loss, and we got hit in 9 and 10. But because of the policies that we put in place, tax, regulatory, legal, and our public schools were developing a skilled workforce, we were hit as light as any state in the nation, and we recovered very quickly. We created all those jobs. But I want to go back to 2003 because there's a real lesson here for those young people that they need to think about. For the first time since the 1870s, Texas was governed by Republicans. Texas, I never met a Republican until I was 25 or 26 years old. Seriously, I mean, or anybody that admit to be one. I mean, I didn't. I grew up in a very rural part of the state, all conservatives, but they were all Democrats. And so I was in the Air Force before I ever met anybody that actually said, I'm a Republican. I was kind of like, well, I always wondered what one of y'all looked like. It's true. But my point is, a lot of people thought when George Bush got elected governor that Texas became a Republican state, but it wasn't. It still had a Republican, I think it had a Republican House, Republican Speaker, and a Republican Lieutenant Governor when George came in 95. When I was elected Lieutenant Governor in 98 and I took the oath of office in January of 99, the last statewide elected Democrat left office, the old Lieutenant Governor. But there was still a Democrat Speaker and a Democrat House. It was not until 2003, just a decade ago, that there was all Republican leadership in the state. And if you'll recall, that was the same time parallel that we had that budget shortfall because of the technology bubble burst. So we showed up there with a $10 billion shortfall, and everybody's kind of like, okay, you know, it's like, y'all Republicans have at it. Kind of like the dog that caught the car. Like, you know, what are you going to do with it now? And there was a lot of that going on. You know, some of the editorial boards were saying, you can't cut $10 billion out of the budget. It can't be done. If you do that, you'll be the laughing stock of the country. You won't be able to recruit professors to the university. This state cannot go through that type of a drastic cutting. But we had told people that if we got elected, we were going to treat this state budget like you have to treat your personal budget or you have to treat your business budget. That we were going to reduce the spending and not raise taxes. And you can't imagine the cries of woe from across the board. But we did what we said we would do. And we filled that budget shortfall without raising taxes. It wasn't easy. But let me tell you what the result was. In a short 18 months, when we came back into office in 2005, we had a $8 billion budget surplus. And that happened because the people in the state started trusting that we did what we said we would do. And that is how we have treated our budget every cycle. I've signed a balanced budget in that 14 years 7 times and never missed a debt payment. And in 2011, we had another big budget shortfall, and we had another session where we cut, and we cut very deeply. But the economy comes back very quickly because the job creators trust that you're not going to take the easy way out and say, oh gosh, it's just too hard, we're going to have to raise your taxes. So the point with that long story is this, that if you will put disciplined men and women in place, and those things are easy, tax, regulatory, legal, and skilled workforce, accountable public school, those are easy concepts. The hard part is finding men and women that will put those into place. I mean, that's the tough part. Finding men and women that can stand up to the special interests and say, no, we're not going to raise your taxes. We're going to cut spending. And because we really believe that Ronald Reagan knew what he was talking about when he promoted supply-side economics. It works. And in the 13th largest economy in the world, for the last decade plus, it is inarguable, it is unquestionable what we put into place in that state. It will work. And if it will work in Texas, it will work in New Hampshire, it will work in any other place that has the discipline to put it into shape, and it will work in Washington, D.C. Washington needs to quit worrying about coming up with more solutions, and they need to be stepping back from a lot of the things that they're trying to fix and to say, you know what, you states work that out. You figure out how best to do that. Here's a block grant for your Medicaid program. You go sit down with your health care providers and your legislature and you figure out how to best deliver health care in your state. I have no idea why they wouldn't do that. Because we can deliver health care more efficiently, more economically, and I'll suggest to you cover more people. I trust you guys at the State House. I'll tell you one anecdotal story. In 2014, January, I believe, there was a host of us in the White House meeting with the President. Probably 20 Democrats, 20 Republicans, pretty equal mix. It was a National Governors Association meeting up there. And Bobby Gendre, who I am a great fan of, one of the brighter governors that we have, an incredibly capable man, he was questioning the President about allowing the states to have flexibility in implementing Medicaid programs. And the President, you know, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, but basically he said, I don't trust you. The President said, I don't trust you to deliver the health care to the people of your state. And I mean, even the Democrat governors were like, that's the problem. We have a mentality at the White House, and I think it's too pervasive even in Washington, D.C., Democrats and Republicans, that they want to control what's going on in the states in Washington, D.C. I just think it's time for us to get back and have a new experiment that's a lot more closely aligned with our founding fathers than what our current keepers want us to do. Yes, ma'am.
So you're against Obamacare? And
yes, ma'am.
Okay, and what about Real ID? Because I don't think that really gets connected in very much, where they want to chip everybody.
I'm not advised about chipping everybody.
Well, maybe I can send you something. Maybe we can send you something.
Yeah, I'm
advisory.
not advised of that.
A media advisory.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
There's an awful lot of malfeasance in this current administration. The IRS, Fast and Furious. And there's a lot of people in the government who think that the government's there to force people and intimidate and threaten people to pursue a leftist agenda. What are you going to do to
to clean that out? I know most presidents sort of ignore illegalities done by previous administrations. They just kind of ignore. But what are you going to do to clean that mess out?
It's a more global issue for me. And I think from my perspective, to answer your question, it goes to the heart of who are the men and women you're going to bring into your administration. And I'm not going to tell you I got the list of the individuals. I could probably name you a pretty good list of people that would be great cabinet secretaries, sub-cabinet levels, EPA administrators. I mean, I can think of a lot of people that would fill those positions. But I want to talk globally, and then I want to talk specifically. And globally, I want men and women to come who don't have anything other, don't have any agenda other than they love this country. They may not want to go. As a matter of fact, most of these people that I would be thinking about probably, that's not what they're thinking they want to do next in their lives. But this country's too important. I mean, I could walk away from it. I spent 35 of my 65 years in public service. I probably have earned a salute and a pat on the back and say, you know what, go to Round Top, Texas and go fishing. And nobody would probably criticize me if I did that. But I can't. Because I believe that the best days in this country are ahead of me. I believe that I still got something to give for this country. I think there are people like me all across this country that believe in America, believe in our principles, believe in our values, and are willing to sacrifice for it. So bringing people like that in. And I want to talk with some specificity about why I think it's really important that we choose somebody that has as much executive experience as we can find to be the next leader of this country. Because we've just gotten through with an experiment with a young, inexperienced United States Senator that had never run anything. And I think we are paying a huge price for it economically and in our foreign policy. I tell people, somewhat humorously, I look at it like this. When you get on an airplane in Boston and you want to fly to London, you want to have a captain in the front left seat that's got a lot of hours, seen every kind of thing happen in an aircraft cockpit that you can imagine, every light blinking that you can imagine. You want somebody like Ken sitting over there in the front left seat of that 777, who's flown it through every kind of weather you can imagine, every type of an event that you can imagine, brought that aircraft home and its passengers safe every time? Or do you want some young, dynamic, great lecturer that can just, water your eyes with extraordinary stories about aviation and about aerodynamics and about meteorology, have you literally on the edge of your seat with the excitement that he gives you in that lecture? He's got 150 hours of flying the airplane. Who do you want? I happen to think that executive experience may be the single most important characteristic of the person that leads America next. When the space shuttle disintegrated over my state in the early 2000s, nobody handed me a manual and said, here you go, Governor, that's how to take care of space shuttles disintegrating. When Hurricane Katrina and the tens of thousands of people that came swarming across the border from Louisiana, followed by Hurricane Ike, then Hurricane Rita, nobody gave me a manual and said, here's how you deal with it. Nobody gave me a manual down on the border and said, here's how you deal with this border crisis. When Ebola showed up in Dallas, Texas, nobody gave me a book and said, here's how you handle it. That's what executive leadership's all about. It's about being tested and what your results are from that test. And I'm quite comfortable in the 14 years that I've been the governor of the 13th largest economy in the world, that I've been tested on a lot of fronts. And by and large, I passed that test time after time. Because the condition of that state is the judge of that. Yes, sir.
You know how Noah around here is telling the fishermen they can't fish? No, Noah.
Oh,
National
Whatever.
Oceanic.
Do they do the same thing in Texas? I'm just asking, like, I don't know if it's just a regional thing or if it's just.
sorry, I'm.
The national
The
fishermen,
I know Noah, and I know,
they put a limit on
On the fishing,
brown
they can't
fish.
go fish.
brown fish in the Grand
Atlantic,
Banks.
they won't let them haul in more fish. And
They're
meanwhile,
putting them
on
out
the
of
coast-
business, are they doing the same thing?
we
in
have, yes,
Texas?
sir, and that's actually some compacts, and I'm not an expert on this, but our Parks and Wildlife Department, our state Parks and Wildlife Department, works with other state, we got the Gulf Coast, obviously, so we've got redfish and redfish limits, and we struggle with our neighboring states, and we struggle with the federal government over catch limits and size limits.
Now, are they reducing the
Yes,
catch
sir.
so that the fishermen can't make a living?
Yes, sir.
And
Yeah.
the-
In
and the
some
fishermen
cases,
are
that
saying-
is the case.
And the fishermen are saying there's plenty of fish, that they're the ones out there.
Yes, sir.
So it's the same thing, so Noah's sort of out of control anyway.
Yeah, I think it's more, I don't think that's the National Oceanographic. I don't know who is in charge of that.
Might be the law of the sea or something like that.
I'm sorry, I don't
National
know.
Fisheries Council.
There you go. And there's a number of all these agencies that are out there. Listen,
The agency to death, sir.
but here's the point. Put men and women in place that can't be buffaloed by the bureaucrats. I think it's so important that we choose seasoned men and women that know where we're going to go, and every day they get up. I mean, the next administrator of the EPA needs to be someone who understands that it's not the EPA's job to kill, or it's not the EPA's job to kill jobs. It needs to be the EPA's job, in my opinion, to be a clearinghouse of good practices. I happen to think the people of New Hampshire and the people of Texas best know how to take care of their environment rather than, I mean, listen, this is just like education policy from my perspective. So let me pitch out a scenario. We want a cleaner environment for our children. We want clean air, we want clean water, we want clean soil, correct? Anybody disagree with that? No, me neither. In my home state, in the last 14 years, we've added 5.6 million people to our population. How big is New Hampshire?
1.3 million. is all
Okay,
right.
added 3 New Hampshires, all right? 3.5. I mean, we added a lot of people. You know how many pickup trucks that is? And they're all driving on our highways. We added more lane miles than any other state. So we got a lot of pickups out there with exhaust going out the back, right? Non-point source pollution. We got all of those refineries along the Gulf Coast refining gasoline that you all are burning and people are burning all across this country. We got all that manufacturing that's occurring in that state. We are at a latitude that is very conducive for ozone production, ozone creation. So your instinct would be, if you've added that many people, that many trucks, that many lane miles, that much manufacturing capacity, your environment's not as clean as it was a decade ago. Is that what the left would tell you?
Sure.
Well, here's the facts. Because we put incentives in place to remove old, dirty burning engines and replace them with cleaner burning ones. We made a massive change to natural gas, to clean burning natural gas, because of policies that were put in place in the state to use our natural resources. We believed in hydraulic fracturing and directional drilling, and it worked. And we created a huge number of jobs because of the manufacturing, driving down electrical costs. And our nitrogen oxide levels went down to 62.5%. Wow. Our sulfur dioxide levels went down 50%. Our ozone levels went down 23%. And wherever you are on the whole climate change thing, carbon dioxide went down 9%. No matter where you are in the political spectrum, whether you're on the far left or on the far right, wasn't that the point? Wasn't that what we were supposed to be doing?
creating an environment where people can have jobs and a better quality of life and freedom. And we cleaned up our environment. That happened in the 13th largest economy in the world. And it's not theory. It's there. It happened. And it can happen across this country. But not with an EPA that's going to kill jobs, with policies that are job killers. And that's what they've got today. And we need leadership. If I were so fortunate to be the President of the United States, I will have an EPA administrator that understands that you can have job growth and you can have a cleaner environment at the same time. And you can have population growth. How you doing, big dog? They let you in back there?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
you're next. You're next.
Governor, glad to hear you say about, especially about the EPA. Having worked with the EPA for my entire career, 40 years plus, from the administrator, various administrators on down, having a strong administrator is essential, but that administrator is going to have to find a way to break civil service, because I've had the assistant administrator tell me one thing, and when I go down to the engineer implementing it, he says, I don't care, he'll be gone in 4 years. So that's going to be part of it.
Really, yes, experience.
Yes, sir. You ever get reassigned anywhere? It's not firing you.
Yeah.
I'm just reassigning you.
Yep. Yep. But
think of the most god-awful place in America you could live.
Massachusetts.
After there's ways to manage people, to get them to follow where you want to go. It's a daily effort, and you know, I truly believe that you can step in with the right leadership. And when you run into recalcitrant individuals, and you reassign them, and after about the second or third reassignment, then people start going, you know what? That may not be such a bad idea after all. Yes, sir. In the back.
Thanks for taking my question.
Roger that.
It's wonderful to see what you've done in Texas. Obviously, the ROI, or the return on the investment that you put out, all came back, and you should be very proud of that. My concern is, my parents came here in the 70s from Spain. Obviously, they were from there, not American. In that time, they became American, worked 2 or 3 jobs. I became of age, became an American, went to the Merchant Marine Academy, and gave my all. I see people coming in this country that, especially in the state of Massachusetts, just to reference something that was close, and they're giving everything back and forth. They absolutely take from what they can and never give back. When do you think we'll ever be able to see what my parents saw?
When the border of this country is secure. That's when it starts. The American people do not trust Washington, D.C. to deal with this issue of immigration reform. I refuse to pretty much have a conversation about it, because I think we are wasting our time. Since 1986, Ronald Reagan signed a bill to reform immigration, to give amnesty to some 4+ million people, with the promise that the border would be secure, and it's not. And until the border of this country is secure, and you can do this. I don't buy into that. You know, there are people that stand and say, "Oh, you can't secure the border." Yes, you can, because I've seen it. I've done it.
Governor, it's one question securing the border, but it's everything else that we have in here that's sucking from the system.
But here's my response to that. Until you stop the bleeding, you're not going to address anything else. And my issue is, until we have the resolve and we have the leadership in this country to secure the border, you're not going to deal with any of these other challenges that you're bringing up. You're not. I'm just telling you, if there's a revolving door and you start trying to do this or that or all of these people's ideas about how you deal with the immigration, everything from, Hillary Clinton wants to make everybody legal, to the point of, picking and choosing and what have you, to, self-deportation we heard. Between all of that. But the fact is, until you secure the border, I'm telling you, we are wasting our time having these conversations about how are you going to do this, how are you going to do that. Americans don't trust Washington until they secure the border. And I'm telling you, I know how to do that. You put the boots on the ground, the personnel down there, you have the strategic fencing in the metropolitan areas, then you use our aviation assets, and I don't care whether they're a drone or whether they're fixed wing or what have you, flying from Tijuana to El Paso to Brownsville on a basis of where nobody knows when they're up there looking down, 24/7, and when they see activities that are suspicious, they send quick response teams to that particular place, and you will secure the border at that particular point in time. Then we can have a conversation about how to get this country back to the rule of law.
Mr. Reagan did some deporting, He deported a whole bunch of folks.
You got to get the borders in here, I'm telling you. I mean, you can deport. Listen, I saw Catch and Release. I've seen every type of program that they've had. They take people back to Mexico and they beat the bus back. I mean, you got to have the border secure. I mean, we are wasting time and money until the border's secure. Yes, sir.
How can it protect our Second Amendment rights from people like Michael Bloomberg?
Well, I believe in the Constitution, and the Second Amendment. I believe in our judicial system. I mean, sometimes I don't agree with the decision they make, but I believe in the system that we put in place. And the Second Amendment, I don't get confused about what it means. And that means that you can and you should have your right to bear your arms. I mean, that's what it means. So, I mean, Michael Bloomberg can spend his money to try to change the Constitution, but he can't. I mean, he's got a lot of money, but I don't think he's got that much money. So, I'm leery of those efforts, and obviously we need to be on guard on a regular basis to defend all of our amendments and our Bill of Rights, for that matter. But I defend your right in New Hampshire to was it open carry? You guys have open carry here, and it's in your Constitution. It's your right.
The governor's going to veto what she says.
Well, you probably get to go to the courthouse on that. We've about ready one question. Ladies, y'all have been, yes ma'am, in the back.
If you were to become president, how do you think you would handle ISIS?
That's a question.
Her question is, how would I handle ISIS if I were president today? Let me just say, if I were president today, I would have a coalition with our Arab allies, with Saudi Arabia, with Jordan, with Turkey. I would have the Israelis in that coalition as well. And we would have the intelligence operation, and we would have the military ability to eliminate ISIS there. That's how you do that. We had the opportunity to stop ISIS multiple times in Syria, in northern Iraq. We put the effort together, and I think you have to do it with our coalition partners. I mean, listen, when the King of Jordan stood up and said what the King of Jordan said, it made me proud. I want to be on that guy's team. I want him on my team. And I want a group of people like that. And I will suggest to you, the Saudis understand what a blight these individuals are. So I think that is the way that you eliminate ISIS, is with a coalition of our Arab allies as well as Israel to address this. And it may, and not just I think our NATO allies as well, but that's the heart of the beast, is right there in the Middle East. And you go in with good intelligence and good military footprint, and you eliminate it. Thank you all for coming out and being with you. God bless.
Well, I like what he has to say. And he's got executive. He's right about that executive.
Abby, I have a question. Do you want to ask him a question? You have one in your head? What? You have a question you want to ask him? Yeah. Well, what I was thinking is, what was his reaction to a woman who's being accused of, not having free speech?
Oh, I sort of asked him about that. Well, we talked about ISIS. He's like all over it.
I know. I think that's good.
It's good. I want to ask him about the F-22.
About
the F-22.
Why don't you? Okay.